Would be recorded tonight. Wow. Indeed. Yeah. Yep, it's 6 o'clock. So we'll call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, okay. Okay. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, Jim. Well, how are you? Well, thank you. Right. No. It's part of the growers program. Okay. So, any additions, changes, modifications? All in favor of approving? We opposed. Okay. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to comment on the agenda items? Donna.
Thank you. Actually, that's something I'd like to read.
That'd be great. Yeah, it'd be better if you came closer. Those two.
At the March 15th special board of selectmen meeting, I granted $13,710 or 20% increase to my salary. While I truly appreciate the intent, this increase is based on the fact that I will be keeping my current position as the land use administrator in the September-October timeframe. And the money granted was intended at the top of the salary of my replacement. My weekly hours will also increase from 30 to 40 hours, based on the actual average hours I have worked in the past year. I implore you tonight asking that you reduce my new actual salary to $71,022, which represents a 4% increase granted by the board of selectmen, but leave the budgeted line at $82,000. I do not believe that it was the intention to actually increase my salary to $82,000, but to put it into the budget as a top of the range placeholder for my replacement. I'm also requesting that the hours refer back to 30 hours per week as an increase in the hours, something that might be better decided by the client. There are other more important reasons why I'm respectfully asking. While comments were made about consistency and across the board fairness, I do not feel that actually happened. At the beginning of the budget process, it was clear that salary discussions were again going to be held at the very end of the budget process, making them rushed and unorganized, a topic to be avoided. The salaries of 2 employees were never even really discussed. For the past 3 years, these 3 employees have been working 7 days a week, answering emails, text messages, and phone calls. And no consideration or acknowledgement was given for their dedication to the town. The total disregard for their dedication and the lack of across-the-board fairness are the more important reasons I am asking. Thank you for listening, and I hope you will give my questions understanding.
Thanks, John. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak regarding an agenda item? Okay, then we will move on. We have no correspondence that I'm aware of. Okay. So we're on to the board of selectmen's budget.
And, I know that Barbara is actually down here, so that,
Upstairs.
yeah, so that we can have the budget up on, who's also copies. Two meetings stacked up against each other. Jean, both sons and Jim are having a really hard time hearing, so, yep. And your volume over the computer.
Let's go back to the beginning. Oh, I thought it was recorded.
No, it's just,
High-end infrastructure, catwalk.
very high. This is really meant to just amplify. Keegan, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, it's Jason. You sound like you're underwater.
Okay, Jason, you can hear us okay?
It sounds like
Is
you're
that any
underwater.
better,
I
Jason?
can make it out, but it's not great.
Is that any better, Jason?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay, it may have been since.
You can hear us too.
Okay. It was that we were trying to, well, we were trying to insulate from this. There's a little bit of fan noise here, but I guess that makes that work. Okay. Barbara, you were gonna do, screen share. I don't know. I still have to log into the meeting. Lordy. One on paper hanger.
Well, unfortunately, Barbara, you're involved in the rest of the discussion. Well, then everybody needs to slow down and take a breath, because, like, there's so much. Move on from there.
I think the first thing I have to do is I need to log on to the meeting, right?
Yep.
So that I can screen share, oh, you can watch everything I did there. It's not entertaining enough.
So you could probably answer one of the questions that we had standing from our last meeting on partnership. And that was some data points regarding equipment replacement for town road and such.
Yeah, that was, that was.
Now it sounds like we're in a submarine or something.
Did it stop?
Yes.
Stop.
Read it again. It's a double. Are there two microphones on at the same time? That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to make sure it's not.
There. Now it sounds great.
So that, I mentioned it's a red. I'm, come up with that. Default.
Okay, but we need that before we can approve the capital plan. So.
That,
You're on the big screen now.
if you just a little minus your Barbara, it'll that. Make it too I just want to be on the same, that summary page.
You told me what they do in the summary.
Yes. So really, we're going to be focusing on that very first page called Summary of Proposed Budget.
The top page that was provided to us.
So what Barbara does, you can all hear me now? Jason, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. So what that provides down the left-hand side is really those sort of big buckets of the summary view of the budget. So going down in A, general government, you can see down below that represents basically all of the departments, a large number of the departments, associations, attorney fees, grant associations, and that represents an almost 13% increase. So that's at a little over $1.6 million. So we're just going to continue down that sort of in that format. Public safety is your B category, and that addresses fire marshal, resident state trooper, EMS staffing, Litchfield County dispatch, which is our regional dispatch center, and civil preparedness. And that's at almost 40% increase over last year at 524, a little over 524,000. Public works consists of town garage, highway department, and roads. That's at a just under 4% increase. D represents social services, the senior center, the welcome center, the public restrooms, and our contribution to Torrance Area Health Department. And that is at a 58.2% increase. E is recreation, park and rec, community house, strip house, and the ball field, which is the Tech Center School ball field. That's at a little over 26.5% increase to a little over $271.5 thousand. Sanitation is the transfer station, and that's quite low at 2.6%. Barbara, do you want to just go over the next sort of G through K for, or G through L for Board of Ed and section?
For the Board of Ed, I just plugged in the information that they provided last week. Debt service is representative of the current debt service that we have. The renovations for the KCS construction project are paid off. So there won't be any debt service for that in the next fiscal year. The transferred capital is taken directly from the 5-year capital plan. Transfer to dog fund is a standing transfer that we contribute to cover the cost of the animal population control as required by the state of Connecticut. And the transfer to Scotticook is a fund that we have that provides for the legal representation for the, I guess it's us against claims. And then the current year capital projects is just what's slated to be spent in next year for the capital projects, but that is really our taxing thing because that's offset by the taxing dollar amount that we charge. Because it comes from the capital credit.
Thank you. So some of so we spent 13 hours, about 13 hours, over 6 budget sessions with the board of selectmen, the department heads, associations, discussing the budget. In many places, as you can see by the call-out boxes, we started in a different place. Here's where we ended up. Some of the more remarkable sections were that are of concern would be, we'll start with the EMS staffing. And I think there's some on the phone. Okay, great. So I've spoken with Nancy and she agreed that it would be a good idea to have the fire department be here to talk during the presentation, to give some details about that EMS staffing number, which is
Line 258.
258. So initially, the fire department came to made the request for $492,000 for that EMS staffing piece. We had a presentation from the fire department, a couple of conversations with them. We ended up, as you can see in the call-out box, we ended up reducing that to $250,000, and then further again last week to $225,000. We're ending we're with the function. And I don't know, John, are you the point person? Do you want to chime in here, provide a little bit of information on EMS staffing?
Yes, I think the at least three of us, I'm sure we'd like to hear from Bonnie and Alan as well. And I'm sorry I'm on the phone here in a car instead of, we were held up at a glasses appointment. But I'm actually pulling into the Kent Green now. What can I hand it over to Bonnie or Alan first and then walk in the room?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, John. Alan, do you want to jump in here?
Sure. Can you hear me?
We can hear you great.
Hi, everybody.
I am.
Hi, Alan.
I'm actually in Colorado on vacation visiting my daughter, so it's very nice out here, I have to tell you. Yes, well, as you know, and as you've been extremely supportive of the situation that the fire department has been experiencing over the last few years, and then a year and a half ago, where we came and did a full-blown presentation regarding the things that we've been working on in-house, and how we had also exhausted every avenue that we could at the time regarding the volunteers. We do use a stipend program, which we explained in detail. I've had that for a few years. That's helped. But the bottom line is we just don't have the staff. So we've had paid or hired staffing that you are, I know, well aware of and came to the rescue with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance during the middle of the year, a year and a half ago. And as we've been updating you, we've, for the year we are currently in, we are, progressing, but we also experienced a staffing internally situation due to health issues of some of our responders, some of it directly related to COVID and some of it not directly related to COVID. But it's that balance that we have been dealing with. And you also, I know, as you're used to balancing things, as you balance the whole budget and for the town. So we want to bring forth the department, the fire department as a whole has looked at this, and they looked at different scenarios, looked at what our possibilities were for getting new members, which we're fortunate. We do have 2 new members that joined recently within the last, I think it was about 6 months now. And 2 of them have, of the 2 where I'm talking specifically, joined up in an EMT class and started that. So that was very positive. So they're factored into some of the formulas that we have worked on. And I say formulas, meaning where we're trying to put together what our current staffing situation is, what we project it to be. And we, with Bonnie, we do that monthly. So we submit numbers to the staffing agency, but also as it comes about, for 6 months at a time or a year at a time. Anything can change from that, like, we've discussed in the past, but we're trying to come up with a balance and a number where we're at. So the department looked at this in great detail. The executive committee, first, Bonnie, myself, John, as the president, ambulance chief, and obviously myself as chief of department. And we came up with a scenario that was, again, just trying to stay with the current staffing model. That number is pretty significant, and that number is actually what you see in the budget that the selectmen chose to put forth to you, or it's very close, within dollars in that area. That is not, just to make it clear, that's not the number that the fire department as a whole requested to be put forth. That number was significantly higher. And I want to explain that. That's why I'm trying to lead up to this to make sure that you understand where we came up with that higher number and the reasoning behind it. And then we know that if the Board of Selectmen, has to make its decision, and you have to make your decision, and it's taxes on everybody all the way through, and mill rate and so forth. So we know, all the work that you have to do and everything into account. So what we did is we put forth for our request as what we called the worst case scenario. And we do have a small PowerPoint presentation that we gave to the Board of Selectmen. We certainly can do that to you at a different meeting if you would like, it'd be shorter, because I know you're trying to receive the whole budget now, but this is a big number. We know that this is a big adjustment from what we've always had in the past. So that number is, I don't have it right in front of me, but it's like $400 and some thousand. And I can bring it up here in a minute if you need it. But the Board of Selectmen, and I can let them talk more about where they came up with the number. But as I said, it's or what they put into the budget that they put together. But as I said, it's modeled, the number bottom line is after the current staffing model that we use. And that is a balance between where we use our current EMTs and EMRs, and they fill so many shifts per week. And then the leftover shifts are filled in by paid staff that comes in from a company called ERM. So this is a hourly rate paid out. The process is still the same. It's where they bill the fire department. The fire department writes them. We do a reimbursement program through the town. So then the actual bill is given to the town, and it's borrowed and so forth, then issues a check back.
Fade it out a
So
little bit,
this
Alan.
way, there is no money being given. Town budget. So that's where we are, and that's how the process goes. And if you want more info, like how many shifts or what we're doing, how this comes, we could certainly get into that. I don't want to explain things that maybe might not be needed if it's already there.
That
Are you ready
sounds
for-
good. Thank you.
Are you ready for questions yet?
Jason had a question?
I said, are you ready to take questions yet? Madam Chair.
If we have questions. So, was that everything that you all wanted to share about the EMS staffing? Yes?
Thank you for my chance here. I wanted to emphasize that President.
Pull your chair up.
Sure. Where am I pointing?
The pod,
Oh,
sorry.
that's fine.
The reselling here.
It's awfully clear in here, Alan. As the president, it was the determination of the membership that the 492 number was appropriate and necessary because it guaranteed the EMS coverage that this town needs, no matter what happens with the volunteer system. And what that design was the ability for us to rest well, knowing we're covered, we got this. And in our very face, it was clear that yes, there are volunteers and several, and there's no plans at all for any kind of collapse of the volunteer system. But it was, if you consider a question, can you guarantee EMS service to the taxpayers of Kent? That was the number that did it. So the number was cut to 250, and that increased that level of jeopardy. And again, it's cut again. And I think it's important just for it to go on record that the additional touch by the board increased that jeopardy. That what if there is a collapse of the volunteer system? What is the plan? And I, as a person who was invited here, I don't know if the time or the protocol allows me to ask questions. But if we even exceed the 225, the plan, as I understand it, is to go to the taxpayers and ask them to approve additional funds.
There can be emergency transfer.
Up to a certain amount.
Direct me funds, direct.
Anything over 20 grand has to go to tax.
Of course, but again, we can,
Right.
it certainly be indicated.
So there's some buffer there with that emergency plan, but after that, we are at the behest of the taxpayers. They historically, there's very little argument, they haven't been, state taxpayers count has been very good. But that does not give us the guarantee. So it appears that the plan is, we hope. And that is the concern. We hope that there will be funding, adequate funding for EMS service. And we, the department, have concern.
Well, I think I will certainly speak for myself, and my fellow board members can speak too, but I mean, I can't imagine the holding. If we ran out of funds, we're not gonna pay those.
Except that it's
I think this is an essential service.
Okay.
correct.
But if we could budget on a worst case basis, nobody could afford to live in Kent. You get where it's going with that?
I do, and I also see the added complication of what is required for things to be diverted to the rainy day fund, I believe, unspent items, the rainy day fund. That increases the complications for you, not the department necessarily. But I think I need to make sure that this is on record, that it's a little uncomfortable relying on hope.
And, from a, from my past regulatory, world, the fire department, it's not that they want to guarantee the service. They are required by regulation, state regulation, and state statute to guarantee the availability of the EMS system that they have signed up to provide as it's called the primary service area responder. And what that means is in the geographic area of Kent, they are required by regulation, required by statute to be available and be capable to provide that basic service. So they're this worst case scenario, we've fallen into that term, but it's less a worst case scenario, and sort of thinking about it as this is their statutory responsibility should the volunteer, the very fragile volunteer,
system, collapsed. Jason, did you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions slash observations. One is, Barbara, again, but in the update to the emergency services number, which we saw last week, you know, just for this year still. What did we finally, where are we in terms of actuals or expected for this year?
The budget, that was discussed last week.
Right.
The number that you gave us last week, which is the number that already blew through the budget for this year, which is one of the prompts for the conversation about what the size of the budget for next year is. We had an update and I just can't remember what the number was.
The number on the budget sheet is from January 27th.
Yeah, that hasn't been updated. I'm pretty sure that didn't.
But we got the number last week. What was that number? I just don't have it in front of me. Which we then said should be, yeah. I mean, it's an important number to know as we're looking at this, and I just.
Right. I want to say it was in the neighborhood of $60,000.
60,000 in addition to, I think that's right, of the budget number, correct?
It's,
From last-
Nancy, it's Alan here. If you can hear me, I'm sorry if I cut out, but it's, we were projecting 50,000, 50.
Okay, so you were projecting 50,000 more,
Yes, to finish out the current year. That's how the numbers were
Okay.
going.
right?
We have a little bit of sunshine peeking through that it maybe it'd be a little less, but again, anything can happen and with the medical situations that we have or other situations.
Now, Alan, well, all of you actually, so that brings us up, what, 150, 160,000 for this year, right?
Yes, because we were at
Okay.
104, so that one, then
Okay,
add
so I'm
50
just
that,
gonna-
yes.
Okay, so work with me here. You were proposing, as opposed to what we'll have done this year. Okay, you guys had proposed a much higher number. The Board of Selectmen came in with a number that we're looking at here. And I guess my question on that is, you know, given the rise last year, why would we expect the expenditure to be so much greater next year than this year's, which already had risen?
The initial request is based on the worst case scenario, so where it would be paid staffing 24/7. That's the
So-
495.
So really, we've got a policy issue and a financial issue here. You're saying you want us to budget for a fully paid staff, even though we're not going to have a fully paid staff, correct?
That's correct. We have no intentions of having a fully paid staff. We have every intention to keep going with our current model.
So
And we're
then you
trying
actually,
to make
you
that.
want to actually just finish with a surplus over a budgeted number. That's what you're saying.
No, we're telling that the town, because remember, the money doesn't come to us, that the town may want, so you have all the information in front of you when you make your decision, that the worst case scenario budget for that line item would be to budget it as it being paid 100%. We're providing you with all the documents and the information for that. And
Yeah,
that's what the department voted to give you.
Okay, so again, because this is very important. But what I heard a few minutes ago was you have a number that you want. You're not giving us simply scenarios. You actually have a number. And what you've said already is that the number provided by the Board of Selectmen is not the number that you want, correct?
Correct. That's not the number that we had requested in the budget, correct?
Okay, again, was it a request or was it arranged for scenarios? I mean, we've got to decide what's viable here. And I actually need to know that, because is this, guarantee, quote unquote, use, is this the first year in which you are planning to guarantee services versus what you have done in prior years? Is that a change, or have we always budgeted with the expectation that we were going to guarantee a level of service?
Since we started this a year and a half ago, we budgeted, and this was all brand new, but we budgeted with what we felt we would be able to do at the time, with a very clear caveat or a what if situation that we brought forth. That was in all of our presentations and in the PowerPoints. It's the first 6 months, we were able to meet that. The next year, which is with the year we're currently in, the what if, the worst, surfaced. And so that's why we're going over.
Okay, now, next question for me is the increase, whether it's what the Board of Selectmen have, whether it's the higher aspiration that you have, does that number simply include, or the increase anyway, include just EMS workers, or is there also in that number, either way, a staffer who isn't there now? I guess the, whatever you want to call it, the civil preparedness, this director of emergency services who doesn't exist now.
And those are two completely different, those lines are very separate. The EMS
Okay.
staffing is paid outside staffing company that the Kent Volunteer Fire Department contracts with, and then when they get the bill, they pass that bill through to the town, and the town then reimburses the fire department.
Okay, so that answers the question. So you're saying that whether it's the 225 or some other aspirational number, that's only for literally staffing to staff the. Okay, that's fine. And a couple of other questions. One other question. And have we done any analysis, okay, on what our budget is, this line, per capita relative to other towns in the region?
We as the fire department did not.
Okay, I think that's an important question for us to know the answer to, of course, because you're asking us to go forward on whatever the assumption is, okay? Because you guys, I'm certain you did a good and thorough job, and you kind of, frankly, saw every dark cloud and factored it in. But my question, I also would like to know, frankly, in evaluating, whatever number we land on, I'd like to know, are we being more, less, or consistently conservative with what the other towns are? And I assume that budget line would be, we would be able to look at that, relative to the size of each town and come up with some number that we can compare against the other towns to see if we are being overly conservative or frankly, not conservative enough. And we don't have that, but I do think that is something that we need to have in order to make, a serious analysis and, recommend as a Board of Finance to the soundness of that number in a budget, because it's a big jump. This is you got to remember anything here, but if you're talking about, $121,000 increase even over the last year's number. Again, I'm just thinking we're all elected and we've got townspeople that we are accountable to. We need to be able to reflect how comfortable we are with that number, because it is going to provoke a lot of discussion.
Jason?
If I can add,
I'm sorry.
I don't mean.
Hey, Jason, that study that you're recommending would also require a demographic look at the community, because one of the issues is that, no offense to anybody who's older, not like me, is that you can only be lifting people and doing all these physical things to a certain point, and so it'd be a matter of looking at demographics in the community.
Okay, but right now we have none, so I'll take some. Okay, so right.
The other thing is that besides looking at the demographics, would be looking at the availability of people, because a lot of the towns have a lot of part-time residents now. And so if someone is in the town full time, I don't know if you have a lot of part-time residents that are on the fire department, I mean, always had the impression over all the years I've been in town, that they're full-time residents, is that right? Yeah. So these things need to be taken into account. Jim, you want to say something?
Yeah, we talked about the demographic studies, and this one exists. That's connected community knowledge. But about a year and a half ago, current pretty companies. Treated as, yeah, it's on their website.
There you go.
It's called Community at a Crossroads. And I mean, this is not, this specific question that we are facing right now is not just Kent, it's every town in Northwest Corner, because we are facing a rapidly aging population with a massive outflow. So this is the downfall of not having county level government and regional services is here to stay. If we don't have the option, we're not going to, we can't continue to act as 160 towns in Connecticut. We have to start thinking differently. And my question, I mean, I think, I hear what you guys are saying about the worst case scenario, but I don't think it's that out of the question that worst case scenario is going to happen within the next 5 years. Like, I think we're already seeing that.
I'm still saying that our job, though, as a committee here is to frankly go through this process and be able to represent, you know, to both the board, to each other, to the board of selectmen and to the public, that we think it's a sound number and not just a hunch, not just a guess, not everybody's gut, but we do need a little bit of analysis here, whatever data we can get. I know I'm always Mr. Data, and that's probably annoying people, but I do think at the end of the day, in good faith, we need to be able to represent that our view behind this number is realistic, based on some evidence other than your guys' hope or aspiration.
So, Jason, there's a famous adage in the EMS industry at the state and federal level, and it goes, if you've seen one EMS system, you've seen one EMS system. And what that means is the variables that go into even just the towns that touch us, each one of those EMS systems is either slightly or very different. You may have all fire-based EMS, but there are 2 towns, I believe, that touch us that don't bill for their EMS training. So they're not getting any reimbursement from Medicare or private insurers. And when you just talk about insurance reimbursement, the EMS industry nationwide has been fighting for improved reimbursement. If you have a Medicaid patient, you get about 10 cents on the dollar for what you are highly regulated to be able to bill. And then you have to also look at the call volume. So call volume is very widely based on what's in the town, and it almost has less to do with the basic demographics, but more to do with like Kent, we have 3 private schools that many hundreds of extra teenagers in our town for 8 months out of the year. North Canaan has a couple of healthcare facilities. They have a factory. They have a big crossroads of big highway system. So all of these variables make it very complex to sort of, and I'm a data fan too, so I'm right there with you. It does make it very granular to try to get to a point where you can say, okay, now I see we have a comparative view here. So it is unfortunately a very complex system.
Well, and therefore we shouldn't do anything in terms of trying to have some data behind this.
No, I'm just trying to sort of give a little bit more information about it.
Hey, Nancy, it's Alan, if you can hear me, and I apologize if I'm cutting in with anybody. But I hear what he's saying, and I feel that Bonnie and I can certainly put together some data on costs, and we can list the population of some of the towns that are using using the same model that we're using. So an example would be a larger town, just I'm just going to say quickly, like New Milford, where they do a combination service. They're almost all paid, but do a combination. At a town like North Canaan, that's a little bit higher in population, but near us. And we could probably take a town like Litchfield and Harwington, and do what they pay out in EMS, where they're doing this combination system, and then we could put it next to the per capita. There are many factors, as everybody knows, but just to start to give some type of number and some type of information there. So I would think Bonnie and I could get that together within the next 7 to 10 days. If that would be helpful data just to look at, and just to have an idea of what's happening. I also would like to share that there are two staffing companies that are licensed to work in Connecticut. And so we have a contract currently with one of those two. And this one, their billing rates were very close. So there wasn't a huge difference in a cost per hour on those two companies. They both were very similar when we had looked at this, a year and a half ago, and went forth with that. The third point I'd like to make is that we currently, because of this, big adjustment that happened with the staffing, and we had talked about it as a worst case scenario, and it was starting to come about. So we have formed a new staffing committee, and I would like to extend an invitation, both John and I and Bonnie, to the Board of Finance to liaison or quote, it's a department committee, but to join that. And we're also asking for a member of the Board of Selectmen, at least to sit in, be involved. So in that, to see where we're going. If you'll remember, Nancy, about 6 or 7 years ago, I'd asked an overall committee, and the selectmen actually appointed one, having to do with overall operations and funding and how things work with the fire department, and to better understand. And that was an official selectmen committee, Board of Selectmen, and they appointed 2 members from the Board of Finance, 2 members from the Board of Selectmen, and I believe there was 3 of us from the fire department. So I don't think we have to go that big or that formal at this point, but we really want to look again at these different staffing models that are out there, relook at it. We did it again, or we did it a couple of years ago, but we're thinking we need to look at this again. And I'd like to make sure that you guys know about it and are welcomed into that.
Alan, this is Jason again. Thank you. That's actually helpful. I just, anything we can get, because I'm feeling we're flying a little blind here, and that's,
yes, most definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Alan, I would ask that you forward the presentation that you did for the Board of Finance last year.
I'd love to see that.
I can send that to Jason to provide some information, and I will also tell you that you need to have information on us for our April 6th meeting, which will be at 7 o'clock here at Town Hall.
Okay.
Because we're running out of time.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Politically expedient clarification. If I use the word guarantee, referring to the 400,000 number, that is the guarantee of funding for the service. There have been occasions where we did not have adequate volunteers or paid staff available for some shifts. And so that might be occasional vulnerabilities where we don't have a full crew. But the paid staff have, as you all know by now, made a world of difference for us in closing so many gaps. But especially if that recent cut down to 225 is worrisome, even if it means really we could go to 245 with emergency funding, I would say we're still a concerning point. That's all.
that's where the communication comes in, and keeping us posted as to how things are progressing. And if it looks like we have to dip into 20, then most likely, if we weren't so close to year end, we'd be mobilizing to set up a meeting with taxpayers to get a vote for an additional appropriation.
And that should be an easy decision.
Yes.
We hope. Nothing's guaranteed.
So one other, I think important component to this whole discussion is that line 241, the paramedic program that we've been, so we contribute with 6 other towns to a model that has saved the town an enormous amount of money over time, where we actually share paramedics. That is their bases at New Milford Ambulance. The 7 towns all share their costs based on a formula, and that contract was extended, and it was extended at quite a large increase, and that was to buy us 1 more year. And like in the rest of VMS, what is happening is paramedics, that level of service, so that's that advanced life support that we, as a rural town, we need that level of care, because we're roughly 25 minutes from each of the 2 hospitals, 40 to 50 minutes to the level 2 trauma center, and a helicopter ride to a level 1 trauma center. So we need a paramedic to be available for us. That model has worked for, Lynn's husband was one of the early architects of that model, 25 years. Yeah. And there's been such a shift in the profession. It is, the costs are going up, the availability, people are not going to, not becoming paramedics, they're shifting right over to become RN, because it's way better to become a registered nurse. And the qualifications for a paramedic are now, they're asking everybody to go to college. So we're going to have to reckon with that.
So this is almost double what the current budget is. So what you're saying is this is kind of a favor that it's almost double. So next year we should expect a new plan.
We need to spend this year and hoping that we can, we've started some conversations with a couple of the other town CEOs, having very informal conversations, because we have concern that the 7-town program is not going to survive. Because New Milford's falling so much, they're actually a paramedic program. They are paramedic level service staff. So they provide paramedics all the time. And so they, less and less, my opinion is that they're not going to need to be in that program. And they represent the biggest percentage of that contract. So if they come out of that contract, it's gonna cause a big problem for us, because we're the next biggest town. So we can't just keep kicking this can down the road. We need to spend the next 7 months looking at a new model, and to Rufus's point, we need to really start talking about regionalization. Every single town with 1 or 2 ambulances is a very expensive way to solve to deliver free hospital medicine. We need to think outside the box, and there are ways to do it. Creative ways that happen all over the country, but we need to get there. There's not a lot of time.
Are there other rural areas that you all have looked at? Because I think that's how big the north corner is. The 7 towns. It's just the logistics of getting from point A to point B. It's a matter of time.
Yes, there are models out there right now that are solving new, fairly model state, but when you start to go out, you get out of New England, you talk about county systems, and those county systems are high-performing working systems that provide
Okay, you want to continue on? Sure.
Another, big bucket, big increase, since we're in that section, line 260 is civil preparedness. That started out, the original request you can see in the call out box was almost $73,000, $72,75. This line has traditionally for many, many years post 9/11 been funded through federal funding. And so what was happening is towns didn't need to address how to better prepare their towns and sort of flow through the new world of post 9/11 United States, where the federal government, state government, local government was really needing to address and be more prepared towns, states, and the country. So because of all that federal funding, it wasn't considered in the budget. And I had a conversation with the CEOs, and they're all the same thinking that, yeah, we didn't really have to think about emergency preparedness, civil preparedness all year, because it was always funded by the Fed. That money was dried up for multiple years. And the last 2 years has been really a whole new world as far as emergency preparedness. They have been involved throughout the whole process during the pandemic. And it's, their primary role is planning and coordination. The fire department provides the response, the fire protection response, the rescue response, that EMS response, and emergency management really addresses the planning and coordination for a town-wide response. So the pandemic obviously was a town-wide response. The tropical storm Itai was a town-wide response. They've created a CERT team, a community emergency response team. Acronym went right out of my book. Which has provided a great deal of support, and it takes off. There's only so much that the fire department can get, right? So they're fighting fires, they're transporting sick people to hospital, caring for those folks. And in a storm, for instance, I'm just going to use that example, the fire department is out working with Rick to make sure the roads are cleared. They're working to do well checks. They're working on doing that EMS response, that fire response. If there's fire at home, that's post hurricane. They aren't available, and their role is not to open up a cooling center. So this is how the CERT team came about. They're CERT all over the country, long-standing model. But what they are able to do, they're differently trained, they're differently focused. Their mission is more that community response. They don't have special medical training. They're not trained as firefighters. They're different levels of training. So that CERT team has provided warming centers, cooling centers. They did traffic control at the test site, things like that. So they've been running on, I think, $4,950 for a long time. They, in the last 2 years, there were increases because of the pandemic. They have moved the emergency operations center, requested from the fire department to move back to the firehouse. And some of the requests in that original line, were for those costs, like they don't have a computer, there's no phone line over there, things like that. And then the LEOP that you see is the local emergency operations plan. So we're required by statute to have a plan that is updated, and that's required by Homeland Security folks. And our plan, I think it's 10 or 11 years, last time our plan was updated. So old that it's 10-year cycle. It's either 2 or 5. I forget. Yeah, no. And what they've done over time is that dangle these carrots. So if you update your plan and do what you're supposed to do for statute, then you're eligible for grant funding. So we can't get grant funding from the state without update, unless you update the LEOP. So that's why they had to put that in there. We also need to have what's called COOP, which is a continuity of operations plan. So if there were, if we had to decentralize government, we need to write a plan to do that. We have no redundancies, basic continuity of operations. As everybody knows, especially in the last 48 hours, we really did cyber. We don't have cyber.
Give cyber insurance, yeah.
Not yet.
You got it.
Through the
Look at it like, well, the big chapter. So what's the timetable for that?
So the documents are for the cyber insurance. Those documents are ready to go to PERMA, and then we review them to give us a.
They didn't give you the list yet.
Oh, no.
Things are required.
You have to jump through those.
Okay.
Who first?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it was 7 documents that I found on the phone with our IT vendor for the better part of 3 hours.
It's an owner's process.
It's very detailed. So that was where the that large bolus of funding began at that 72, 75. Some of it is all planning, some of it is equipment. There was an ask for stipends for the director and deputy. Those were pulled out in the 315, either the 311 or the 315, where you can see it went from 70 to 25 to 30 and then down to 20. So, and Eric couldn't see it even, but the concern is that there's no money to do with it at the 20,000. And this, these are not ongoing costs. Where much of that is a one-time cost to get those actually there's another piece of the local emergency operations plan that will get a bonus $5,000 to do a pandemic annex to the local emergency operations.
It's Jason.
A lot of
Yeah, so are you saying that the number in the budget for the coming year, that 20 will then drop down in the following year?
Yeah, that, I mean, it would, they're not going to be able to do any of the plans. They're going to be able to get some of the equipment and probably start to work on the LEOP.
Because it's now 20,000 as opposed to 72.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, yes. Yeah.
So,
I think it's more of a general question. I thought I figured out. We must have looked at all the possibilities using ARPA funding to apply to the budget.
One of the things that ARPA doesn't like is to support operating costs of their funds. So it could be a one-time thing, yes. It would be sustainable, yes.
And the funding from last year and the equipment that you needed in terms of software and such. Did that look at all to get any of that?
we did we subscribed the virtual, that was done reimbursement.
What are you talking about? The ocean?
Yeah.
The very first subscription was, the second year, it was the start to do nothing for 7 months. But we still have the current.
And those Barbara can probably, the FEMA reimbursements are extremely time-consuming and complicated to process. So that was emergency management, and then just a couple of other highlights to dovetail on what Donna had said earlier about the land use officer position. I'm sorry, it's sort of not a specific one line. Yeah, it's sort of, this is sort of speaking to the, we've had a lot of turnover. We've had folks that have moved out of state, folks that are retiring, and that's going to continue. I think we've had so many, we've got a great group of long-term employees that are very committed to the town. But, we will have turnover, and those long-term employees really, having long-term employees makes it really financially lovely for us, because we're not, it's hard to articulate. So when the previous parking director left, the board quickly realized that in order to attract a candidate that would come in, be seamless, hit the ground running, we needed to push a bunch of money of that. And we're going to continue to do that. We have the land use administrator, inland wetlands officer that has been doing this for a long time. She's really good at what she does. She's highly respected in her field. We need to attract a great candidate. We saw that with social services. Rufus had Rufus the elder had really advocated for the board to push some funds to hire a really qualified replacement for Leah. And we were on the top of that, and we offered to do the night to do that. But this is a trend, and I think that it's really important that we make sure that we're leaning into this to make sure that we don't get a gap where we've had someone who has amazing institutional knowledge, really great qualifications, but they're actually saving us a lot of money, because out of the market, that salary would likely be higher. So it's just sort of a.
It's Jason, if I can chime in for a second. I'm on the rec thing. I wasn't as concerned. I understood the director salary thing. What about the hourly employees? You have a big jump also, almost a 19% jump in that line. Why is that?
So some of that is the registrars of voters.
Well, no, recreation. But yeah, that's in the recreation.
Sorry.
Their hourly employees, they increase the wages for the lifeguards. They're having trouble attracting lifeguards. I think it's coalesces with this argument Jean was just making, and camp counselors and things like that. So they increase the wages and also bring them up above.
Jane, did you hear Barbara's response?
Not quite. Go ahead again, please.
Park and Recreation submitted a budget with increased wages for the positions for lifeguards and summer camp counselors because they're having trouble attracting people to these positions.
Okay, I mean,
often those workers, Jason, are what are difficult to retain. Often you'll have a high schooler who will come in their junior and senior year, then they'll go off out either into job market or into to college. And so they drop off, and now it's an every 2 years sort of thing. We're trying to find a lifeguard that's got to have their lifeguard training when they walk in the door on Memorial Day or June 15th, whenever we open Emory Park, and that can be tough because there's short seasonal workers as well.
yeah, I mean, I think the issue I have with that is, frankly, there are no doubt these conversations going on, not just here. But, you know, a 19% increase, I mean, we're in a, you know, a higher inflation phase, and we're frankly contributing to that when we kind of are, you know, outliers and going up well above that. And, you know, I just think at a time, just like when we've had low inflation, we've done better. I think in high inflation, I think we've just got to be more careful about it. And, you know, it's still a 19% increase in that line item. And I would just like to think we're putting a little more effort into trying to manage that number. You know, because otherwise we're just contributing to a spiral that's going to continue. And I just think you have to be more vigilant about it, frankly.
Any other comments on the Park and Rec budget? So I have a question about the fee programs. Why are they increasing?
Approved after school supplies. The Board of Selectmen added $3,000 for fee program software.
So that's just the last of these, or?
Yeah, I want to have a new online registration thing.
Oh, parents can pay online too.
Yeah,
Is there
and
an
register.
annual fee or a per person fee, or how are the fees set up, you know?
I don't know.
Because a lot of those programs are, it's become very expensive if you have to buy.
Yeah, and there's, I think that, they're looking at 3 different options. There's sort of a platinum one, but I think we're not gonna take that one, even though it has lots of bells and whistles and go around. But it will, it's very robust software, and there's, web-based software, which is how it is.
And so, the first name is, that's just trying to bring back the parks with the volunteers who've done what they can, but, they're pretty sad shape.
So, right, so there's $7,000 for a parking contractor, and they're actually, part of their request is $25,000 for, drainage repairs along, in both parks. Rick did a walkthrough, with Jared the other day. Okay, so I know that there's currently drainage issues on the whole, the path that goes around the park. And that was, that is definitely not the term.
It's like a bowl. Yeah.
So that's, that is. And I think it'll be good to have a parking person so that, you know, having that done on and off.
So any other comments or questions on the Park and Rec section of the budget? What else would you like to call for attention?
What about the treasurer number?
I'm sorry, Jason?
Are you ready to talk about the treasurer line yet?
No, we're not there yet, but we can go there.
No, well, it's up to you. Yeah. I'll leave it to you whenever.
Jason, I was really go through her presentation with us asking questions to what she was presenting, and then I thought we would go through the entire selectmen's budget and give everybody the opportunity to, on the board, to ask questions.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can, Barbara, she requested an increase in hours from 15 to 20 hours a week. Was my concern. That is line 79.
But that is the treasurer's budget.
And then she also asked for her clerk to be increased from 10 hours, 10 to 16 hours a week.
But with all the reporting and such, I can only imagine. No, they want, talk about data, they want data published or something.
And the grant, Barbara, manages the grant. Right now, there's some big grants. And I'm hoping that we can continue to really work to get grant funding. There's so much grant money that we are leaving on the table. There's Barbara the other day, there's a grant for staffing and what is it? It's called the Safer Grant. It's for fire and EMS staff. And that's money that we should be going after. But that puts more reporting and, documentation on our business. And federal grants are getting more and more complicated. We have we're flowing through the TAP grant, we're flowing through the sidewalks, we're flowing through the connectivity grant for the phase 1 of the sidewalk, the housing, $800,000 housing grant for some repairs at, oh my goodness. And common, yeah, the affordable housing. So there's a lot of there are a lot of deliverables and a ton of reporting, and then there's the ARPA funding that she's gonna have to manage. So
Jean, just on this whole notion of grants, period, which I think is a very good idea. Do you have a matrix? I mean, do we get some kind of a schedule? Here's what the big things that are out there. Like when I look at the capital budget and the bridge thing, are we looking at, infrastructure money to support us on that? Are we, it would help us also just to kind of have a sense of, and you're saying it's going to cost in order to do that, but nonetheless, what is potentially out there? Because there's big budgetary implications of anything you can do and anything you miss.
Yeah, so there's a number of FEMA grants that we should be looking at and applying for. And some of it is that we have free EMS staffing, some of it is for big purchases of equipment, which is in capital for the fire department. Also, this IIJA bill, legislation, what it's called, but the Build Back America has, I think, $6 billion coming to Connecticut for transportation and infrastructure funding. We have been, every meeting I've been on, COG, CCM legislative committee, they're all talking about the enormous amount of funding that is coming our way. Some of it will be addressed in the grant funding that we already get, so the town road aid, but there will also be funding that we will need to apply for and funding that we will be competing with other towns on. So and there's a lot of work that federal government is requiring from local government to be able to apply. The big hot button term was the project has to be shovel ready, which means engineering work has to be done, all the background work has to be done, and when you go to apply for your however, how many culverts are on the capital plan right now, Rick? Total 5?
Bridges on there.
I'm sorry, bridges. So when we go to part of the potential funding that we could wipe out a number of bridges out of our capital plan.
Right. Could I ask the chair, is it something perhaps after we get through this budget cycle, of course, but it might be an interesting agenda item just to have a discussion about this at a meeting when you don't have such a full plate of other things to deal with, because I think it's financially material enough that it might be worth our time to kind of, see it all on a piece of paper, from the thing, here's what's on the landscape, here's the things we're really going to do, and have some discussions, frankly, about what resources we're devoting to make sure that they can do that.
Yeah, I guess that's my question here, is this enough? It might be enough now, but are we looking at the situation? Like, I'm dealing with my job, where, you know, at one point you could get away with part-time work, very Yankee, Northwest way. You know, do the most, with the littlest, with no benefits, and, you know, we'll pay absolutely rich. But we are going to be facing much more complicated treasury questions in the town as we go forward with larger bonds, larger grants, increased complexity of how the town is run. You know, I think we also need to see from Board of Selectmen sort of like a kind of like a forecast, like is this, like this might be adequate now, but 3 years from now, we need to start planning now if there needs to be, if we need to start thinking about, okay, what kind of, that's my question. I know we all know Barbara Potter. So I think that's my concern is like, yeah, the sort of looking ahead a little bit of what is the paramedic EMS. And this is not unique to Kent, it's a rural issue across America. Again, we don't have county, so it's not like we have those resources back. So I guess that's my own concern. Like,
Some long-range planning, they should be very, very constructive. Yep.
Municipal development, or whatever, I don't know, yeah.
So, I think the last piece that I want to share that came out of our meeting was the need for the board of selectmen to really take a deep dive into the salaries of all the different departments, the different workers. We have a lot of folks who, again, have been saving taxpayers a lot of money as long-term employees. We have folks that are doing, multiple different, wearing multiple different hats, and are they getting compensated appropriately? And that management review that was done in 2018, needs to come off the shelf, and we need to definitely take another look at that. But we need to really take this year, and this has been something that's been ongoing, and take this year, do a deep dive, and come back with just better, really getting a whole picture for each of the departments.
So total compensation review, not just a rate review. Okay, going back to the budget, is there anything else you want to share before we start asking questions? Okay, why don't we start on the first page and go from there? So if anyone have questions before we start the budget? Okay, anyone have questions on the registrar of voters budget?
It's Jason, maybe we could just get a little color on this since there's kind of significant increases, both registrars and workers. But why is that? I'm certain there's an obvious reason that I'm just not aware of.
Yes, so they're looking at, there are a number of elections from November.
Okay.
There's likely to be primaries, there's a secretary of state race. And also, as Barbara mentioned before, coming up to that state wage level for all of the workers. I think they're making, I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, what the minimum wage is $14. Right. So to meet that for this coming year, 15.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Jimmy had a question about the registrar of voters.
Are those higher expenses this year related to the same election year?
Yeah.
Okay, questions on the Board of Finance budget?
Same thing, question, you have an assessor and the tax collector assistant, both with big jumps. Could you just say and give us a little color on that as to why?
I'm sorry, you went to which budget?
In the, well, treasurer, we're in that, are we in that section? Yeah. Oh, you're in tax collector. I'm
Well,
sorry.
I just asked about the Board of Finance budget. So-
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry, excuse me.
Move on to the treasurer now.
Mhm.
Any
Okay.
other questions for this? Okay, how about the tax assessment?
Well, yeah, I asked that question. I was just gonna, could we just get some color? Is there some reason for the assessor and tax collector assistant numbers?
I'm sorry, Jason, we couldn't hear you finish talking.
I'm sorry, you have under treasurer, you have an assessor and a tax collector assistant, and you have an 18% increase in the assessor and a 56% increase in the tax collector assistant. Just could you tell us why, so we're aware of it?
Well, it's kind of written in the
Right, yeah, in the call out box, they're
Okay, right.
increasing their hours. For the.
But just the number, so it's the number of hours, not the, right.
Jason, did you get a copy of the budget?
Yeah, oh, I have it right in front of me.
And does it have the call out boxes on it?
Yes, it does.
Okay, good.
And my only question on it was, so your increase, you tell us what it is, and, I assume you did some thinking on why, though, I mean, that, which isn't in the box. Yeah.
And so that request came from the tax assessor.
Okay,
Increase in work, they're gearing up for, they rebound in 2024. It's funded in 23 and 24.
So it's a 2-year process.
Yeah, that usually takes them. They just have this.
If you want to get that information for the next meeting,
So we can get some more detail.
that would be great. Thank you. And the tax collector.
Gene, are you able to explain the increase in the assistance hours?
For the
Line 106?
right, so that's an increase from 10 now. It's just what.
The question I'm asking, that seems to be a almost purely software driven function.
Anything else on the tax collector? How about the board of assessment?
I was not there. This one.
The other. How about the conservation commission? Town clerk. Planning and zoning, we did hear from Donna. Any other questions on the planning and zoning? How about the zoning board of appeals? And the wetland?
yeah, that was a significant increase, so, you might tell us why, again.
I'm sorry, Jason, you couldn't hear you, Jim was talking.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jim, go ahead.
We're seeing another one.
Oh, I have a little question in mind, general. The preparing for the possibility of needing to spend more money for a replacement in a current budget. I guess that's more of a statement.
So, Donna's plan, right? Yeah, so, my goal is to retire at September, October, and have a replacement. My position is going to be administrator for that, work, so the 82,000 top of the line will be split between the two departments, to be buffer. So that when I leave, the person that they hire will be making more money than I do now. But at least there's money in the budget to cover it, instead of having to have everything higher. So it's really just kind of a protection. After doing the salary survey, we can top range with
And 16. Worst case scenario.
Right. So I think it's better to have money than not have money. That's entirely.
Thank you.
Jason, you had a question about it in wetlands?
That's okay, never mind.
Did that cover it?
Yeah, it's explanatory enough, which is the answer is they want more money, so.
Okay, building official. Budget. Any questions there? Hearing none. How about town hall? So I'm questioning why heating rule is decreasing. That's kind of a surprise to me. How could it be decreasing with the cost?
It's not before. Everything was crazy.
Sounds like an honest answer. So that's definitely an exposure.
Probably at this point.
Rick, are we ever in any kind of meeting of contracts? Protect.
Well, buy contract with the state, but the state did price the state.
So is that just for the cost of the fuel or is that the premium as well?
There's delivery price. We used to be able to sort in the region, but you had a lot. Then you're locked in for years ahead of time. So a lot higher prices, oil is going down. It might be
Then what, talk to us about the phone studies.
There are a number of employees who requested a monthly stipend for their personal cell phones. And so when there's a question, and we add that in the different, and it's $600 annually.
So they're being used for town business. So those phones are completely unreliable. That is an exposure to the town. So if there are key employees, it makes sense to get them to work from. You might think
Which would be in the budget.
Right.
anything else on the town hall budget? Attorney fees, anybody want to ask questions about that?
The Board of Selectmen has a special meeting on, 29th to, get an update from Justin Wicks regarding how to approve the, CIA, the urban affairs applications that, application that came through a number of years ago, and, there's been another application that was, submitted for federal recognition. He's going to be updating us on, so, not sure that number means. I'm sorry.
So that goes to cover separate budget.
Yes, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead.
These increases are.
Oh, so, now why do we still have cell phone applications?
That was just a note from. To explain.
Oh, I see.
Why, but there were.
So this 50,000 is for the current.
And anything else on the attorney fees? Anyone? Okay, how about the grants?
Seem pretty flat, except for minimums. Sure.
Sure, yes, please.
Yeah, they did request 10,000.
Nancy,
Yeah,
it's Alan Govel. Did I hear you're just about to talk about grants? Is that where the fire department grant is?
yes, it is.
If appropriate, I'd like to give an update for you guys.
You're not asking for an increase.
Correct. That's part of what I wanted to update you on, is that what we did is we were able to take some money that we had in savings account, in lack of different word for savings account, and apply it to our operating budget to be able to keep things flat for the town and to balance our budget out. It's not a reflection that costs are not going up. Costs are going up for the fire department, just like every other, many other places, as you guys have seen and been dealing with. So we are aware of that, balancing that as best we can. And but as money comes out of savings for that, they won't be able to do that continuous years. So we're continuing to work with Gene and other places to where consolidate, and Rick, we do certain things like tire replacement and so forth, where things can, come to get the best prices available.
So Alan, what you're saying is that you'll be asking for an increase next year.
It's looking that way. I just want to give you a heads up there. Again, there are other factors that'll come into play for next year's budget, some other ones. And I have to say, and since this is recorded, that the citizens of and the people that donate to Kent were very, very generous on the fundraising letter that went out. So in a time that, some people don't have a lot of money with COVID, and others do. So they were very generous with the fire department. So that helped a lot and was able to help us, again, with this for this year.
Thank you. All right, anything else on the grant? Questions from the board? All right, how about associations?
Contingency, 246. 10,000.
That's just normal contingency.
It looks like it's there for the first time.
No, it gets spent every year, so it gets moved out. It gets moved back to different.
All right, how about, a question on the insurance. So, do we go out to bid for that? Do we have firm go out to bid for, actually, the firm up? Do they go out to bid, or do we engage a broker to go out and do kind of,
Well, health insurance is different, but permit is just, we're self-insuring ourselves. So there's no going out to bid. It's a consortium of municipalities.
I know, I don't permit for my school.
Right.
So, what I'm saying is to see what other possibilities there would be for liability insurance. For my-
Size.
Yes. Is that ever been done? No, not mine either. Is it supposed to? Oh, okay. How about the fire marshal? How about the town garage building, the pink pearl? Highway department.
Just informational for me, what's the health insurance opt-out stipend, what is that? Obviously, those who are eligible but are getting insured elsewhere, but do we pay them that amount who aren't in the plan?
So a full-time employee who doesn't need the health insurance benefit from the town because they do their spouse or what have you, those folks get a stipend of $15,000 opt out of the health insurance.
Is that a flat rate for all employees, or
It's up to the church.
so it's depending on whether it's family coverage or single coverage or employee plus one? Any other questions on the highway department?
Because the asphalt usage going up or the price? Well, the usage will depend on the price. Just put out. And there's going to be some kind of increase. Maybe do the same amount.
All that social services.
It's Jason, just looking at my notes here, where we said the health insurance, the 39,537, which you haven't had it in prior years. Is that just a housekeeping matter in terms of how you're accounting for it?
So, for the social services, that was increased this year to account for the increase from the social services director from part-time to a full-time position.
Okay,
So that's assuming a family rate?
Yeah.
Well, that's really high.
It's an HSA plan. HSA plan.
help sense. What,
$4,000.
thank you. Any other questions on social services? How about the senior center? Should the building supplies are for disposable? Recreation, any questions for recreation? Sure.
That's a good.
That's basically to correct an under budgeted amount in prior years. If you look at the actual, the Welcome Center gets a lot of leadership, and there's a lot of cleaning, and it's gonna go over budget this year. We've been talking about it already, so that's a correction.
Was that you backed up to Welcome Center? Is that what that is? You're talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah, I had a question about that too. Is there just, I understand the increase. Do we think there is any money out there grant wise? That seems like a logical one, that there might be grant money for, but I'm not gonna hold you to it. Just kind of say, put an asterisk next to it.
Yeah, we can certainly look at it. It's the lion's share of the cost is for cleaning.
Right.
Anything else on the Welcome Center? Anything else on recreation? How about the community house? Questions on the split house? The Kent Center School, ball field maintenance. Yes, a separate line. It's, up 3,500. Quite a bit.
Now it's the days. Requested 30,000. Field car. The computer that we have.
Not because it's still.
How about the transfer station? So how many hours are in the, week that are scheduled for the transfer station?
It's 7 each day, right, for each, 8 each day. I'm sorry, 15.
For the two and
Do you think that shipping fees are gonna increase at all?
Sure. Go on slightly.
But not anything crazy.
No, well, that's still part of the contract. Mostly it goes to cost.
And that is another one of those sort of, potential moving categories that are one change in your plan clothing. There's a lot of lot of concern about the towns, the rest of the towns in the pod are, their list goes to zero, we're the only which are out of the town, or two actually now. And so that Europe plant was about.
Anything else on the transfer station? For the application, we've already, had, with us, and we'll be probably talking about that afterwards, or the next meeting. The debt service, any questions on that? The next,
We expect it to stay, we didn't consider the street state.
right. And that would be part of the longer range discussion, to look into that.
I don't expect to get this budget, but I do expect.
Yeah. Anybody want to talk about the transfer to dog fund? Okay, so now that we have you here, we want to take this opportunity to ask any questions about the capital.
Jason, on that, my only question, obviously besides grant money and, infrastructure money is, when I kind of look at the bridges in particular, with that, how are we looking at it at all in terms of with price escalation, et cetera, any way that we can, or at least have we thought about front loading it somehow, if that's in our interest, or have we asked that question, like, the things that you have in the out years in the capital budget?
Did you get all that?
Oh, I heard front loading, I've been asking for that for years.
Yeah, no, my question was, again, just that we see, you've got some big things coming up. And, I'm certain you guys do this anyway, but if you're looking at things we have in out years, is the number we're budgeting reflective of where we think costs are going to go by then? Or are they basically current costs if we took those expenditures this year? Given that we've got this inflationary, period that we're in.
You're talking bridges, most of those are on like an 80-year cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully, once I get this group of them done here, I think we're going to be pretty much through the whole list. But then here, so unless I say another 50 years, so repeat.
So,
But I mean, they're going to be at normal maintenance, so that comes from operating.
so as far as escalation and the prices though, is that reflected in the capital plan? Each year, if there's inflation.
Well, you're going to find out that things are going up, then there's some increases come across. You want to front load 5 years out. 50 years, oh, 3 years.
Well, I think my question was, do we think it's necessary or not, or have we at least asked the question? Right?
Do we think front loading is necessary?
So for instance, you're doing usually, because the way you're funding your capital budget, obviously, you're making a transfer every year and it looks like it's a flat number. But if it's a flat number every year while costs are escalating significantly, is that a problem?
These last few years, they have been going up quite a bit. For years, we're pretty much keeping the same number. Like crossing even bridges, we're always putting in about 200,000. Using a little bit of low stuff if we had to do the bridge. It's just gone up so much over the 4 or 5 years. you think that's gonna continue for on and on, and we'll have to start put more in there. The things level out, then I think we're good.
Okay. Just want to make sure, even to ask the question, so.
Just don't think it could be jacking those prices way up. And this, you don't anticipate inflation 5 years out. Do it, but otherwise, take care of it.
And you've been adjusting as you said over the years.
Yeah. That's pointed out in that plan.
Okay, thank you.
So any other questions for Jean? That's it. So we ready to move off of the children's budget at this point and move on to the next item on the agenda? Okay, that would be old business. And Lucas, I'm going to ask you to run part of the meeting. I'm going to excuse myself. So step away.
So we are discussing the auditor proposals. I'm sorry, we're discussing the review of auditor proposals. Resigned suddenly. We have two proposals in front of us.
You have them?
One is King and King,
I didn't bring it downstairs.
and then the other is Cinnamon and Associates. So I don't know if the board has had time to review the proposals. So basically, the difference is, it looks like, I mean, in terms of like when I was reading the proposal, the Cinnamon and Associates seems like work more municipality continue thing. And they were also seems to be by quite a bit, and then there was a flat rate as long as you did the contract, which is still in me, versus anything kind of application year over year. I don't know what the board feels about that, but it was a $22,000, Cinnamon was $22,000 per year, expecting a 3-year contract, versus King and King, which, no.
There's a big difference, obviously, between the two. Do you have a point of view on it?
George Cinnamon said that he would honor our current auditor's contract because he felt that we had already budgeted for that amount. So his proposal offers to honor that contract for this year, and it also gives us an option to hire him for 2 additional years. So that's where the 3 years comes. I'm familiar with them. I've never worked with them, but I'm familiar with them. And they do other municipalities.
I've worked with King and King, but that's what, a lot of, that's where they came to here. That is prime, they're one of the primary nonprofit.
It's very similar, but obviously you can see that one firm's prices are much higher than this. And I think that's just because they can command those prices.
Because what? I didn't hear that last piece.
They can command those prices.
Right. So so what does your gut tell you? I mean, if they're basically, the proposals are similar, the costs are 2x and want to, that may be a short-term benefit. When I read it, though, he was meeting the budget number this year, and it looked like the next 2 years also were within the range. Isn't that right?
That's true, because we were still under a contract with the current auditor for the next 2 years, so he just threw the next 2 years.
And, okay, so I mean, obviously subject to your, since they both have a robust list of municipalities in the area, I guess if you are checking, I assume you would talk to, your counterparts in those municipalities and see what the level of satisfaction is. And, but if you've got a $20,000 difference between the two, I assume your gut would be to, go with the lower if all things being equal, right?
That's a question to me, yes.
Okay.
That's sort of where I'm leaning toward as well. I mean, especially if it's, 3-year agreement, figure out how much federal funding, what the federal funding is.
We will be subject to federal because of the cap program.
I guess that's my other question, because I didn't see in cinnamon that was no additional federal single audit.
There's $2,500. But we won't need one for this fiscal year.
I mean, is this, I guess my question, action items, finance decision,
Yes.
I would like to make a motion to record the cinnamon pending reference check.
That's why the peer review is there. That's what that is. So there's no.
I'll just strike that last part. All those in favor?
Right.
Aye.
Any opposed? One abstention. Motion passes. All right, Andrew, come back to the meeting.
One of those auditors is my auditor.
And to be clear, I no longer use. That was my old job. All right. And I think the chair is here.
Okay. So, yes. So do we want to review the revenue tonight? If we want to, sure. I think that would be a good thing to do. I think we need to reflect on the others. You may want to discuss this evening. You may want to hold off until the 5th. But there's a lot going on here, and I definitely we will have to have our meeting on the 6th. So, and unfortunately, we didn't have to leave, so we will be some 10, just maybe closer to the 6th. Okay, thank you, Jim. Revenue. So basically, I checked with the departments that do have revenue and got projections from them and asked them for information. The only other real thing that's on here is interest from investment. Everything else either comes from state estimates or from departments or from, in the case of the cell tower, we have a contract that goes up a certain percent a year, so that's just the formula that I did. So, we start with the interest for property taxes. That would be a tax collector. Unpaid road is from the state of Connecticut, state property, telephone property, educational assistance, the PCLOP funds, state of Connecticut miscellaneous, that's municipal revenue sharing for that fiscal year they're projecting. The community house, the Swift House rent comes from a calculation in-house. Interest on investments, who knows where they're gonna go? Go up. Miscellaneous fees is the money from the two schools and then the member equity distribution from Kerma. However, I think that may need to be modified with feedback that the select board is getting regarding contributions to the state troop program.
Own conversations. I'm sure it's probably not.
So they get theirs to the fire department directly,
We give them,
so they're out.
And I have a question for Randy about, because we are engaged in.
So I have a question, Barbara, from what line would we receive the money that is from the tuition in some school?
that's down a little further.
Oh, okay.
And I actually have asked the staff at the center school to give me a number. They haven't provided that yet. Transfer station income is pretty much based on the trending that we are having, raffle permits, you know, fiscal permits. Everybody's got them. P&Z road inspection in wetlands, ZBA comes from the department, township fees comes from the department. KCS tuition, I put in 50,000, but the note needs to be verified. And then these park and rec fees, these were fees that were given to me early on, and they actually may be different at this point, but nobody's giving me updated information, so I need to double check on those fees.
I'll come with you. Well, I can't see the screen, so.
You didn't share the screen. Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you.
I apologize.
Apologies.
I increased the transfer from the Maple Street extension because that is supposed to be paying for that debt service. So there's plenty of money in there to make that transfer. At this point, there's nothing allocated from the general fund, undesignated general fund, that's a discussion we have. And then the 806 is directly from the capital. And I'll go back up to the top for everybody online who didn't get to see what I was talking about earlier. This ESFG is estimated state funding. This miscellaneous fees is where we would put any revenue that we receive for the state trooper program, contributions from the general public. Cell tower rent is a calculation based on our current contracts with the people that rent the cell towers from us. And most of the other revenues are department driven, and so those numbers have come from.
Okay.
Questions on revenue?
I mean, I think pending verification. Okay. I'm okay if we ever know.
I don't know the exact percentage, but 90 to some odd 95% of our revenue is out. That's just the way.
And that looks like it was up.
Well, that's only because that is a calculation based on what it says.
Based on the.
But I think
Okay.
it's totally. Because these worksheets are. I think I mean. Okay.
All right, if we don't have any discussion on the capital, does anybody wish to talk more about the board selection budget, the budget this evening?
now that we have the budget.
Right. Yeah, so is there desire to have further conversations this evening, or?
When is our next meeting?
April, right?
The 6th, a week from tonight.
Okay,
Or 2 weeks from tonight.
no, that's right.
So, no more questions or comments?
No, not for me.
Okay, Keegan? We lost her?
She's off, yeah.
We lost her.
She just went off.
All right, so we'll move on then to comment of public and invited guests with a pretty list to speak. Lynn?
I got a bunch.
Uh-oh.
I asked the fire department officers if this has been considered, they were told it had not. But no one has asked in public meetings I've attended if can volunteer fire department looked at hiring a community. My question is, should that be considered to be a position for that? Well, I'm not sure. Which part? My other questions are, why does the fire marshal choose to be the only person who's got this percent?
Do you want to answer, or do you want to just read off all the questions and then?
Both, and you, please.
I just wasn't sure. That was the budget that he submitted. And so he isn't budgeted, the fire marshal isn't budgeted the way the rest of the time.
Isn't he an employee?
He is,
But wasn't the motion 4%?
but he doesn't, he budgets his own set of hours, and that was what he submitted, so. We could add 4% to his hourly rate, but that was the total amount that he submitted that felt that each department.
Is he going to be doing less hours?
It all depends on how many fires there are, investigations and how much that.
So that's what drives it, just that, not inspection.
So what is it a policy that they said we're going to do everybody?
Yes, but he's a different kind of, the only reason he's an employee is because he's covered up for the first time. He's not an employee, like, they don't decide how many hours he works. And he doesn't say, I need to increase my hours, but they have more, I don't know, work, that kind of thing. It's a strange hybrid position.
So they don't direct him.
And it's
My other question is, why is there no increase to the senior center COVID line? Or like,
Program. You want to tell us what line that is, make it easier, or just let us look for it? 312. 312, okay, got it. Thank you.
no answer in particular. Talking about the program. The new social services director taking that on. No, because you're a number, they number.
That's really COVID. And COVID, it's spending, which they couldn't have. But even in 1920, there was no. I think it's an opportunity.
Which has.
Sure.
About the fire department. As part of the new staff that we just put together, that is one of the options that we're investigating. have our first meeting tomorrow night, so, we're looking at all the different options out there, different staffing models. So that is one thing we are going to do.
And that question, we definitely talked about that last year and this year when we proposed.
We will be looking at that. Good, thank you. Thanks.
Not for now. Would anyone like to stop?
I think, our minister, we have all of the formal motions that were much received today. There were 2 requests to add additional lines. I think the franchise has requested that the board of selectmen line is split out into at least 2 lines, if not 3. And then the request was made for the preparedness to also be split out. And then the account will for the $20,000 they have. And I think one of the good that you were you manage that those lines and how they're created, that you know ask whether or not those additional lines can be added to.
I disagree. I don't think that it was up to me to ask. But it is the Board of Finance oversight, the general ledger. And it was my understanding that it was the Board of Selectmen.
I'm not prepared to make it. Anyhow, have that conversation about.
That's what I was, thank you. Okay, I was just looking at my 266, that, there was a lot of asks for this line, short line. But looking back at the fiscal year 2020, we did go over the budget in 2003. So I would like to know even more than there are other slides. But in our talking about the preparedness, it had been broken down, the line had been broken down further. Certain communications, that would be, and of course, and this OEP plan seems to be up to 2 years. So it seems to me that planning for civil preparedness, which by the way, I still find really odd. But I don't know if we break it up into just 3 or 4 simple lines. That would be easier to understand as we move forward. Again, I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if that's about that tier or web mesh.
Yeah, I would like to work with Barbara and bring that to that. Well, just work with Barbara and change that.
The district transparency, make it easy enough to question on that shit, the Board of Finance, the public.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you're gonna look at, budget line or between sort of like a capital layout. I don't know that. I'm not a municipal financial expert. But I mean, if we can't add lines, it would be right now. Especially if Cooper, or whatever, is in the current 2 years.
So let me just speak a little bit before you go on about the overrun in fiscal year 20. That was the year that COVID hit. And so all of those additional expenses were COVID related. And at that time, we didn't know if we were going to get FEMA reimbursement or government reimbursement. The state shut down on March 15th and our fiscal year closed on June 30th. So that year, our auditor had us put those expenses in the civil prep line. And the next year, when we got reimbursed from the state of Connecticut, so that's why that looks that way. Historically, that line has been budgeted at, I want to say around $4,000 every year, and it's never, ever exceeded it. Well, normally FEMA money comes in for storms and things like that, and expense comes to highway department. Right, but the post 9/11, federal money that we use, the COD, well, then it comes to our budget. And
And then so the question about the selectmen's budget is down.
That's, yeah, that's the second part, that's what line 40, that was the stuff, as I was looking at other plans, other towns, they do that. That's the first set of this stuff. And as they talk about salary, I don't know what to do with that. I thought it would be easier for us to do a handle. But again, there may be a reason why they're all treated all together. Which is transparency.
I think it's worth a good discussion on this.
So you can make recommendations.
okay, the other thought, yes, Darlene?
Only because in the past, spoken in public capacity process that people are supposed to utilize with them. Inquiring or requesting revenue to support the super program. And if you look back historically in previous years or minutes, there's been a continuation of their, I don't know when we're asking for them of the school and whether there is a participating program. It's never in writing that we ask them. It's phone calls and meetings. Especially last year, I guess I would urge the Board of Finance to look at more than even the recording of the meeting in the minutes. Because I can say there was a definite push to by Secretary former selectmen to inquire of our first selectmen, how are we doing this? When are we doing this? Why are we getting late? Why are we getting the answers, not getting the answers? And I think that what eventually happened, and I'm not sure, but I believe at one point Barbara put forward a projection of this is my best way I can put forward revenue based on the historic way that those have been changed in previous years. So with that supported information, why those revenues come in, it influenced the budget based on a confirmation of the school actually saying, yes, we're going to make that fiscal year donation. So I think that it should be brought to the attention is that we don't invoice for the 2022 year until maybe May.
Right, well, proof that.
But we don't ask for it and so without confirmation, we put it in the budget. And they don't invoice for it until the end of the year. If in the event, and there is respect to the school to be made, or in honor of why they need to do this decision, we may not get that revenue at all, which means that year end, we're at this point last year, 40,000. Based on that. So I guess I urge again that the Board of Selectmen, represented by the first selectman, if we're going to continue with this supporting that the town adopted the super program all those years again, with the concept that it was going to be supported by the revenue of the private school. If we're going to keep that process, to our public, that's how we're offsetting it. We need a better process supported by our first lesson versus we're going to call them, we're going to hear back. Who are you calling? And who are you not hearing back from? Because we now know we don't know that we're getting this year's money, and now we're actually saying we're not quite sure that we even know the revenues in that budget line are correct for 22, 23.
There's no MOU.
No, originally there
But
was,
in fairness,
the first 2 or 3 years there was.
right, and that historic fact is not that many. And there was a teacher that heard at one point in the school that left your town attention that they couldn't pay based on circumstances of birth. That was referred to legal counsel, and it was left to the town to manage it discreetly and respectfully. I understand that, that was advisory from town council.
those revenues? I think it's actually better if I can just say, we don't rely on the revenues, we the program cost X amount, and let it go, because the way it's being managed right now, it's a disservice, because we're not telling the taxpayers truly how much money are we actually paying for the people.
There are other costs that the private schools contribute to for fire or emergency services.
I should, you know what, I would not say that, I should have made private information, but I can't.
Sure.
I'm just worried about me. As far as I know. It's always been. It's a hash off to me, it's always been, right?
But again, here, I think it needs to happen at the end of the prior year, formally written, a part of the select application. We have asked, and maybe we should make a phone call and have a conversation, but be very black and white about it, and if they choose not to, then they'll let us know. But that way, you'll have a good budget.
But that even then saying no, I would expect you to say that. I think that's also fair to the school that we all have to be able, so that we, these questions, the comments that come up after we're that imply that they're there, then reason why they did it, didn't. I think that should be respected.
I can't imagine the school paying a check for that amount of money, but that's such a tough application, so, you know, yeah.
I agree, and I mean, I think too, we need to be looking for the each time private schools in some way, because they do these kind of issues. And so how I get that they're nonprofit. But, you know, I'm a giant nonprofit, and I have to pay for, you know, so I would guess that it would behoove us, especially for like fire department, they have to buy water trucks. Building an account, you know, whatever, but there is some sort of. And I understand that not all the schools are financially stable enough at this point to do this, but you know, I think that needs to be a conversation. Agree with should be formal, just like any other agency paying in, there has to be a formal written thing with fire.
Well, and then a follow-up, solicitation payment.
Even if there's not an MOU draft, it should still be a town request invoice.
I agree. I agree. Ben, agree? I agree. Jason, what do you think?
No opinion.
Oh, done, sorry.
I just want to send me the revenue. The sheet of what you just put out for the revenue.
Sure. We need that too, of course. Thank you. Any other comments, questions, with the viewer? They're being done. Even then, Jim here.
Yeah, in Jim's place, I think.
Okay. Thank you for being here and your input.